Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, sponsored by the Draft Professors. Joined today by Draft Professors Taylor and Draft Professor Steve, and we are here to do some defensive tackles. Before we do that, there's kind of like a big game. I think there's one more football game left, right? Taylor, who you got?
I hear.
I don't know. I don't trust Sam Darnold, but the Seahawks defense is crazy good. The Patriots just have a way of keeping games close and fighting through it. And honestly, nobody really gives the Patriots defense enough credit. I know during the playoffs, everyone talked about the Texans defense and the Broncos defense and some of these other defenses like the Seahawks. But man, the Patriots defense is just unbelievable. Getting Robert Spillane back right before the playoffs. Christian Gonzalez has been really good. Same with Carlton Davis on the other side. So it's going to be a really tough matchup. I think the spread is like 4.5. I might take the Patriots, to cover that spread of 4.5. But ultimately, I think the Seahawks get it done as long as Nick Emmanwori, his ankle isn't too bad, huh?
Yep. And Steve, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see Seattle win. I bear no ill will towards Darnold. Would like to see it for him. And, it's a good story. I'm not a great Patriot fan, so that's another, you know full well about the AFC East. But, my only concern, like Chaw brought up about Emmanwori's ankle and, these guys are professionals, but I just also hope that the whole thing with Kubiak and the Raiders hasn't been really a distraction, because look, whatever happens Sunday night and then the switch gets flipped and he's got to start officially putting a staff together. It's not like, any of these guys just do it cold turkey, but, so we'll see. Meanwhile, after the show tonight, and the 9:00 podcast, there is the honor show. So, and the Hall of Fame announcements. So we'll see what that holds.
Yeah. And Steve, I'm similar to you. I'm having a really hard time to cheer for a team that's in the AFC East. Right. I mean, my shirt might show my bias a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, these,
by the way, this is like one of my coolest shirts. I do want to thank my cousin because she was one that got it for me. It's a buffalo that's shaped like a chicken wing.
That's awesome.
I thought that was pretty cool. So shout out to my cousin Dawn. So
that's awesome.
But we're here to talk about defensive tackles. And like last year, I'm going to say it was a historic defensive tackle class. If memory serves me correctly, last year we saw it was either 6 or 7 go round one. And then we had about 12 go in the top 50, right? And this year, do you think that we're even going to see 6 guys go in the top 50, Steve?
No, I definitely not the top 50. I have 6 ranked in my top 100. I only have 3 or 4 in my top 50. But no, I don't think it'll be anything like last year. I think when all it's said and done, I wouldn't be surprised. You're the stats keeper, what the average, drafts are at the position, but I still could see, 15 or 16 go between Thursday night and Saturday, all 7 rounds there. It's a deeper class than I think people realize when you start really diving into the film of some of these other guys, whether it's, I'll just throw a name out there, Landon Robinson of Navy. I happen to like also Bryson Eason of Tennessee and, DeMonte Capehart of Clemson. There are guys, that will be contributors. So.
Well, and I think I'm going to make 2 comments and then pivot here to Taylor. So one comment is if your team needs a starting defensive tackle, get it in free agency, right? You don't want to go into this draft class needing a starting defensive tackle. With whatever, whether you run an odd front, even front, if you need a defensive tackle, get it in free agency. That's my advice to every NFL GM in case they're watching the show. Second comment, Steve, kind of pivots to what you said there at the end, and that's I think this draft has a decent amount of what you might consider like the one tech or the zero tech that you would take on day 3, but you need to be a special nose tackle or one tech to go on day 2, like T'Vondre Sweat did. But like if you think back to last year, like Jordan Phillips, CJ West, they went day 3. So Taylor, how would you describe this defensive tackle class before we dive into any of the players?
Yeah, it's interesting. Last year you hit it on the head. 5, I think, went in the first round, and 12 went in the top 86 picks. I just looked it up. So for reference, in this year, for my rankings, I only have 5 total guys with around 3 or better grade, aka probably the top 75, 85 picks. So I think you're right. I think we talked last week off camera after we got done with the running back show, and you had mentioned how this wasn't a strong class, and I kind of disagreed with you. But then I start looking into it, and I'm like, okay, I get what you mean. It wasn't the same as it was last year. And again, that class was loaded with the Michigan D tackles. Same with Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, some guys that went in the top 21 of the draft. I have 4 first-round grades for defensive tackles this year. So I think it's top-heavy. I really do. I think you're right. You're getting a lot of these guys, that are the one or the zero tech guys that can play over the ball, really, really good in the run game, but not very twitchy as pass rushers. And a lot of those guys are going to be rotational pieces on NFL teams that are going to go on day 3. So pretty top-heavy class, but I really, really, really like the guys at the top. So it's kind of an interesting class to evaluate, because if you don't want to go into you don't want to go into the draft without, signing a free agent, it's probably just a depth free agent, because I really think there could be 4 taken in the first round.
Yeah, and Taylor, I'm just going to take a guess as to who your top 4 are in some order. Peter Woods, Lee Hunter, Caden McDonald, Caleb Banks.
Yep, you did not nail the order, but you nailed the 4. Absolutely.
Okay. Steve, are those your top 4 as well? Caleb Banks, Caden McDonald, Lee Hunter, Peter Woods.
That's actually my exact order.
Wow.
Okay. Oh, wow. And I was actually reading it from the bottom of my list up. So you have Caleb Banks as defensive tackle 1.
Wow.
For now, and it's an evolving process, but I liked him, in 2024. I was really high on him. Obviously, I always ding injury. I've done it with other positions, whether it's Jordan Tyson at receiver or, Jermod McCoy at the cornerback position. But, the tape matters more than what goes on during, the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl. But seeing what he did in Mobile a week or 2 ago, whatever it was now, that reinforced it. And, as said backstage, I also like to make sure that Taylor and I don't have an exact match. So, in 2 weeks' time, I may not still have Banks as my number 1, but, just the size, the length, the ability to move the way he does. Yeah, he's getting my number 1 vote, for now, for sure.
And with Caleb Banks, what do you think is his best role for an NFL team? Do you think he's a 0 tech, 1 tech? Do you think he's a 3 tech? Do you want to move him around the line? How do you think the best way to use Caleb Banks is?
Yeah, I actually like the idea of him being sort of a hybrid. I think with Banks, his ability to walk guards back and, be really disrupt that pocket. So, I don't know that I would see him as a true nose, but I think the skill is there, in sort of a hybrid role. That's where I see him. What about you, Cha?
Yeah, I think a hybrid role makes sense. Just get him up the field, and he can make plays in the run game. He can make plays in the pass game. You won't find a more explosive defensive tackle in this class, especially at his size, 6'6", 330 pounds. I didn't know what his final measurements came in at. at the Senior Bowl, but just one of the players that has the brightest upside of any of these defensive tackles. I know the injury history is long. He didn't play a lot this year, but what he has shown on tape is a willingness to, fight, willingness to battle, willingness to come back, especially from that injury where people thought he would just kind of ride off into the NFL draft, and he came back and played 2 or 3 games at the end of the season, weeks 12, 13, 14. So I think that led into the Senior Bowl, and I think the more people see him at the Combine, when he runs, all that stuff, I think he's just going to only, explode up the board, and I do have a first-round grade on him, but he is my 4th-ranked defensive tackle. So.
Yep. And a couple things we should point out about Caleb Banks, and this is very similar actually to the Deion Walker conversation from last year. Don't look at the player's weight, 330 pounds, and think he's a nose tackle. He's a penetrating defensive tackle. And Steve, I think you hit it on the head. You want him lined up over a guard. You don't want him over the ball. You want him over the guard where he is going to be able to penetrate. That's his game. And the reason why I say that is a lot of people, Bills fans, looked at Deion Walker and said that he's like a nose tackle, right? Because Deion Walker is very similar, height, weight. No. Buffalo used Walker more as a 3-tech where he can move laterally, and that's his game. Similar with Caleb Banks. So if your team needs somebody to put over the ball and hold up the point of attack, I like to call those players fire hydrants. If you need a fire hydrant, look elsewhere. kind of thing.
Yeah.
Taylor.
He's definitely more, he's not a pure, sit and eat nose. He's more of that shade nose. But yeah, again, I want him, the way he disrupts, I want him on the guard.
Yep. Taylor, who is your defensive tackle 1?
Yeah, my defensive tackle number 1 is Caden McDonald from Ohio State. You talked about in order to get drafted in the early 2nd round, like T'Vondre Sweat, you have to be an impressive nose tackle, and I think that's exactly what Caden McDonald is. I think he is someone that you put in that 0-tech, that 1-tech role, and you just let him go to work in the run game. I mean, he just destroys guys in the middle of the field. You can't run up the middle when he's on the field. I think he's going to be an early down guy in the NFL, but he's going to be someone that makes a ton of plays. And if he can develop anything as a pass rusher, more than what he already is, I think his upside is just, pretty tremendous as well. But as a run defender, it's really, you're not going to find a better one in this league. It's stuff in the middle of the field.
Okay. And Steve, where do you have Caden McDonald?
Number 2. Yeah. And Chaw hit all the good bullet points. I mean, his run efficiency is, fantastic for this class. There's a great explosive first step. His hands are violent. And plus he has a very low missed tackle rate. He has held his ground, especially in the All-Star game against the double teams. I know don't put too much stock in those practices, but he wins on the inside leverage during the run reps, and still he generates, the interior push. Just, good pad level, high motor guy.
So how does Caden McDonald grade relative to Tyleik Williams for you, Taylor? Tyleik Williams from Ohio State, who went 28th overall to Detroit last year.
Yeah. I don't know if I have a direct, comparison of the two, but I can tell you what Caden McDonald does well. And I think him being one of the strongest defensive tackles in the class really translates. I think, Steve mentioned double teams and the way he eats those up. And I think that's what an NFL team is going to be getting in Caden McDonald. I think they're going to get someone that just absolutely gets probably 2 defenders most plays, and he still can make plays in the run game and also just free up those one-on-one matchups for the edge rushers, especially on early downs, play action, things like that, where he's eating up space in the middle of the field.
Yeah.
So I went back to my notes. Yeah, y'all know I'm an Ohio State fan, and so I'll pay particular attention. I think McDonald, has a better anchor versus double teams. I think, he's built to reset that line of scrimmage and kill the inside zone. Williams was an excellent is excellent run defender. I think there's a little more movement laterally in his range. And I think he can penetrate depending on on, what the play call is. I think when you look at McDonald versus Williams, McDonald is probably the safer plug and play guy. Williams is very good. I just don't know that he's as much the immovable object that Caden McDonald is.
Okay. And Steve, who's your defensive tackle 2?
Caden McDonald.
Oh, so
Yeah,
it's
right
McDonald. So who's
there.
your defensive tackle 3?
Number 3 is I've got, and I think Cha. Well, it's number 2 for Cha, number 3 for me, and that's Lee Hunter of Texas Tech. It's a name. Obviously, he's gaining more popularity based on, what went on in the last couple of weeks. But here's the thing, right? We all know, and if you're new to the channel, you should know, or you're going to learn how good that Texas Tech D line is, right? You've got obviously Hunter. I could talk later on about Gil Howard, Skylar Gil Howard.
Yep.
Obviously David Bailey, Romello Height. Excuse me, backing them up. You've got Jacob Rodriguez. So, but they all fit a role and they all made each other better. And there are certain things that I look at, when I'm coming up with a grade, looking at the pass win rate, which is very important. I think draft professor Jolene brought this up also in a tweet within the last few days, that's one of the things that translates the best to the NFL is that pass rush win rate. And I agree with her, the run stop rate. And then there's some other composites. And Hunter came out as one of the top. Actually, when I look at those metrics, did come out higher for me than Banks or McDonald. But he's a very balanced interior defender, good, strong run fits, enough rush ability to stay focused, on the passing downs. He's got a high floor, with, I think, a very high ceiling. But here's the thing. And I read this recently and looked into it. We all remember the playoff game Texas Tech had against Oregon. Okay. And I think if Texas Tech had different quarterback play, they would have won that game, right? It was really just a kind of a putrid offensive showing. The one defender that concerned Oregon was Hunter.
Lee Hunter.
It wasn't Bailey.
Right.
Okay. And it wasn't Hyde and it wasn't Rodriguez. It was Lee Hunter.
And it should be pointed out, Lee Hunter is going against a top 40 offensive lineman in Emmanuel.
Without
Preston.
a doubt. I mean, I've got a top 40 grade
round center next year in Iapani Lalulu, right?
Yep.
So those two guys that Hunter was going against in that game, and I remember watching the broadcast. Like he was a man. Like,
yep.
Right. And so Taylor, I have a question for you about Lee Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
So you have if I understand your board correctly, Taylor, you have McDonald higher than Hunter, correct?
I do. Yeah, I do.
So with Hunter's upside as a pass rusher, why do you have McDonald higher?
I just think right now he is, and as good as Lee Hunter has been, especially in that Oregon game, I mean, to me, he just looks like, to me, he just is a better space eater in the middle of the field. Now, they're definitely not going to have, like, McDonald doesn't have the pass rush upside and probably never will. But as an early down run defender, I think he's going to play a decade in the league. Like, I think he's going to eat the middle of the field for a longer period of time, much higher floor, in my opinion, for McDonald. And then, like I said, just his ability in the run game to just withstand double teams and be in the right place and make plays in the middle of the field. I think it's second to none. And Lee Hunter, actually, I did bump him down to 3 after we talked, Steve. So he's my third ranked defensive tackle as well. But yeah, he's another one of those guys that just has tremendous upside. And, I did give him a little bit higher in my rankings of an upside grade than I did McDonald, but still when it all factored in together, McDonald was still ranked a little bit higher.
Okay. And then Taylor, who is your defensive tackle for?
Well, my defensive tackle, the only one we haven't talked about in the top 4 is Peter Woods, and he's number 2 for me. And Peter Woods was someone that, I think a lot of people have been down on a little bit because the production wasn't necessarily there. But, I go back and you really start to dig into the tape, and man, you just watch his hand usage at the point of attack, and it is unparalleled in this class from an interior defensive line, both on rundowns and in the pass rush. And just because he doesn't put stats up on the board, he is a guy that is always in the middle of the field, putting pressure on the quarterback, plays. I watched the game against South Carolina, and he just was phenomenal up the middle, pressuring Lenore Sellers, making him force the ball out early, making him throw it inaccurately. And I think Peter Woods is just one of the most solid players in this entire draft class. I don't necessarily think he has some spectacular, ceiling or anything like that. But I think if you're asking me right now today, which two guys can come in and make an immediate impact for me as an NFL, franchise and whatever situation it may be, especially in the interior D line, Caden McDonald, obviously one, I just talked about him, but Peter Woods is right there, number 2 for me. Just a guy who is really, really solid. And, sometimes people dig into the production too much and don't watch it. If you watch every single play of some of these games, you see he's making an impact, but it's not showing up necessarily in the stat sheet.
Okay. So Taylor, for Peter Woods, do you think his best role is as a 0 or 1, a 3 tech, or is his best role to move him along and across the line, depending upon the situation?
Yeah, I think he can be moved across the line. I think that's something that I think he's capable of. Sometimes they did line him up as a pure nose tackle, and I thought he's so good with his hands that it doesn't really matter if he's going up against a center or a guard, whether that's over the no, whether that's over the 3. It doesn't really matter. So I think he can be mixed around at all. And I think part of that is because from a fundamental standpoint, in terms of, utilizing his hands at the point of attack, I don't think there's anyone better in the class from a defensive tackle perspective. And that translates to all 3 spots on the interior offensive line. He can fight with guards, centers, doesn't matter, double teams, all of it, because his hand technique is so good and he's able to get free into the backfield. So I like Peter Woods for that reason.
Okay. So Steve, similar question, but we'll put all 4 into it. So all 4 of the top 4 guys that you have ranked. So would you say it's a true statement that if you need a 0 or a 1 tech, somebody to go over the center, the teams would likely have Caden McDonald and Lee Hunter higher if that's what they specifically need? Like if they're running an odd front defense, it's possible that they would take McDonald over Woods?
Yeah, because I see Woods. I mean, I don't disagree. You could move him around, but I see Woods as a primary 3 tech interior. He's a tone setter. So yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. So then we have a group of defensive tackles, and I'm going to list some names. And the reason why, so I haven't seen Taylor's or Steve's board, right? So we're just kind of going through the list. But there's a tier of players that would include Dominique Orange, Kristen Miller, Rayshawn Benny, Daryl Jackson Jr., Xavier Harris, and Chris McClellan. So, Taylor, my first question to you is, I just listed a group of players. Would you have anybody else whose name you'd want to drop into that same group of players that should be discussed?
Yeah, I absolutely do. Zane Durant out of Penn State is a guy that I would throw in that list as well. I actually have a 4th round grade on Durant. He's my 6th overall ranked defensive tackle. Again, this is a pure 3 technique. That's what you're getting out of Zane Durant. He's not big enough to be over the nose, but that's where he plays. And if he gets one-on-one with the guard, it's tough for the guard to keep up. He's a smaller guy, so he's low to the ground. I think he's only 6'1", but he's 320 pounds, something like that. But he moves really, really well. I don't know if I have Zane Durant's exact size in front of me, but he moves well for how small and low to the ground that he is. And man, some of the snaps when he is either coming around, rushing the passer off of a stunt or something like that, he can get in there quick and he can make plays. He also makes plays in the run game. I just really liked his production when I saw him, and I thought, he's one of those players that maybe a tier below Lee Hunter in terms of upside, but I think there's a lot to work with there from Zane Durant. I think, you look on Penn State's tape, and I know they weren't very good, but you turn it on and you see number 28 making plays. So Zane Durant would be that guy for me.
Okay. And Steve, in that group of players that I listed, what other players do you have that should be mentioned with the Dominique Oranges through the Chris McClellans of the world.
Yep. And I've got stuff on all of those, but I kind of want to tell Ryan Sparks, get out of my head, because I am very high on Grayson Halton.
Do you have Halton graded up where like Dominique Orange is?
I actually have Grayson Halton right now as my number 5.
Wow.
That high. Yep.
Okay.
Very high right now.
Okay.
Again, it's a work in progress, and it's funny because one of the knocks on him is, he's considered a little undersized for that position, but we're talking about, 6'2", just under 300 pounds. There were guys that we've mentioned in names that are 6 foot even, and they may be a little heavier, a little lighter. Not a lot of production prior to 2024. Well, there you go. Good job, Ryan. But the sack production, his alignment versatility, he had a really good season 2 years ago. I brought that up, but he has an excellent quick first step. And let's see what else. He just knows how to get after the quarterback. Primarily, I would say he's a 3-tech interior penetrator. He has been used to shade, very frequently. He was deployed on passing downs and on interior stunts. But again, he's got an active lower body movement. He does a good job avoiding, contact from the H-back. And he was ranked second, I believe, among SEC defensive tackles in pressures. So when I go back to my rankings and I, come up with my overall rate, pass rush win rate of 10.4%, run stop of just about 10, that graded him out to, on my scale, of over 11. And if there weren't truthfully, that would put him at number 3 or 4 if I didn't look at other things. Landon Robinson, another guy that Ryan brought up, also has a very high rate, but yeah, he's my number 5 for now.
Okay, so a couple questions on Grayson Halton. So, the channel has covered Halton several times. Question: he wasn't an every down defensive tackle for Oklahoma, was he? Like, to the best of my knowledge, like when we did scouting reports on him, the issue with Halton was that he never won a starting role.
Yeah. I want to jump in on that real quick before I let you go, Steve. I watched film on, I fully scouted 11 of these defensive tackles and ranked them. I'm going to tell you right now, there are no full-time defensive tackles. That they are rotating on a per drive basis, whether the team is inside their own 20, the other team is inside their own 20, working it out. They have a different defensive tackle package, a lot of defensive linemen, same thing, than they do in between the 30-yard lines, right? Then in the red zone, they have another defensive tackle package. Like, these guys are rotating in so much. I think that's the part of, evaluating defensive tackles that's a little bit underrated, in my opinion. Is like, none of these guys are going to most likely be a defensive tackle that's on the field every single down. Chris Jones is probably the best defensive tackle we've seen in the league over the last decade, give or take. He's not on the field on every single down. Right. So, all of these guys are rotating in so much that I think that you don't necessarily have to be the first group of defensive tackles, in a game to make an impact, right? You want to be in the game. You want to keep those guys fresh, rushing the passer. It takes so much energy expelled on every single play on the interior of the, some of these guys are eating up double teams every single time they touch the field. So I think they just rotate these guys in so much. That's all I want to say on that real quick. Cause I think especially with, schools like Oklahoma, where you're getting in transfers and recruits and different guys every year with the portal that come in. They just have so much talent that you have to rotate these guys. So that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, and you took the words right out of my mouth. To Jim's point, I think he was more rotational than some of the other guys we've talked about. I think the last season it was 240 something, 244 pass rush snaps, generated 38 pressures. But yeah, you're right.
Well, and to the point, so Taylor, Sean McDermott's defense one of the things that we would laugh about as Bills fans is like they would invest so much money in the defensive line, and then none of the guys would get 50% of the snaps until the playoffs. Right? Like Ed Oliver was notorious for getting a 40%, 45% snap share. Right. And
Yeah.
he's like, he was at one point the highest paid. Same thing though with Greg Rousseau and all these other guys that they had. So that being said, do you think that you have enough reps on film? For like a fair evaluation of Holton?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. I think I would compare him. I think I would compare him to CJ West a little bit from last year, who ended up going in the early 4th round. Where did Grayson Allen transfer from, or Grayson Halton transfer from? Grayson Allen basketball.
Grayson Halton.
Where
I don't
did
have
he-
like PF.
Did he transfer?
I'm looking at PFF on Halton right now.
He might not have transferred.
I don't think.
Point being, a guy that's similarly sized. He's shorter. I think CJ West is 6'1", like 316 is what he measured in at. Grayson Halton, 6'2", 220. I think he's a guy that can go in that range, right? 4th round, 5th round. But the reason CJ West was borderline unknown. He was in that Indiana rotation last year. He was one of those guys that didn't play every single snap. You start getting to the Senior Bowl, you get to the Combine. CJ West was a standout last year, and he rose his draft stock to the top of the 4th round. I think Grayson Halton's kind of in that same boat where he has work to do. I still have him, down a little bit in mid-day 3 right now, but I don't see any reason why he can't rise up through this process. Kind of similar to CJ West did last year.
And Taylor, who is your defensive tackle 5?
Yeah, so my defensive tackle 5 is the only other player in the defensive tackles that I have a top 75 grade on. I just read Graves, and that threw me off. But is Darrell Jackson Jr. Out of Florida State. So this is a person. I'm excited to see what his actual measurables come in. I don't know if we have official measurables on Darrell Jackson Jr., but holy cow. Darrell Jackson Jr. is a massive, massive human being. And at that size, you shouldn't be able to move like that. So Jackson, for me, has one of the highest upsides in this entire defensive tackle class. And I think that's why he grades a little bit higher for me. But if you look at the production is there as well with Darrell Jackson Jr. And I just think he's explosive for his size. I mean, he is, when you look at the tape, you see Jackson on there, you can't miss number 6. I mean, he is a massive, massive human being.
Yep.
And I just think there's so much there for an NFL team to shape and to mold. And you already see flashes of it at the highest level. Obviously the ACC just was represented in the national championship. So one of the best conferences in college football, people are saying. But he's just a really, really, really freaky athlete, like for that size. And I just can't. It's similar to Caleb Banks. Just I have him as a round 3 grade, whereas I do have Caleb Banks as a round 1.
So it's interesting on Darrell Jackson Jr. So he's a very polarizing defensive tackle prospect. So Taylor, you are the 2nd highest I've heard on Jackson. So Jack Brentnall has a top 50 grade on Darrell Jackson Jr. The grade that you have is actually really similar to the grade that Clint has. So Clint and I podcasted for the Falcons earlier today, and Darrell Jackson Jr. is a target for the Falcons with their 2nd round pick, which is 48th overall, right? Because they need that guy to anchor the middle of the defense. And he said, if it's not Darrell Jackson Jr., I'm waiting until day 3 of the draft, right? It's Darrell Jackson Jr. or bust for the players that would be in the tier that he would take with pick 48 for Clint. So, Steve, where do you have Darrell Jackson Jr. on your board?
Yeah, so he is number 8 for me.
Okay. So who are 6 and 7 for you, Steve?
Okay, so I've got Banks, McDonald, Hunter, Woods, Halton. Then I've got Big Citrus at 6, Kristen Miller. I'm sorry, number 8. Kristen Miller at 7. It would help if I, put numbers next to the guys. Kristen Miller and then Darrell Jackson. So he's number 8 for me.
Okay. And then Taylor, who do you have as defensive tackle 6 and 7?
Yeah, so mine are Zane Durant, who I already went over for Penn State. That's my defensive tackle 6. And then I also have Mr. Big Citrus, Dominique Orange, as my defensive tackle 7.
Got it. And did we cover your 5th, Taylor?
Yep, that was Daryl Jackson.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, let's talk about Kristen Miller and Big Citrus for a minute. So Taylor, which of those two guys do you like better?
Yeah, I have Dominique Orange as my defensive tackle 7, and then Christian Miller is at defensive tackle 9. So really close, same bucket. I actually have a 4th round grade on Dominique Orange and a slightly lower, just but like a high end 5th round grade on Christian Miller. So honestly, these two guys are very, very similar. For me, I think Dominique Orange is more of a nose tackle, going to play right over the ball. Again, another guy that just, dominates double teams, right? But he is one of the least agile defensive tackles that I've heard, or that I've looked at so far. He just can't move east-west, but man, north-south, getting him up the field, keeping that line of scrimmage right where it's at, eating up 2, blockers at one time and still making the play. I think Dominique Orange is an awesome, awesome player. But again, he's not a guy with a high upside. So that's why he's a little bit lower in this tier. Day 3, going to be a rotational guy, early downs. But Christian Miller, to me, is someone that can be moved around the defensive line a little bit more. So I actually have him rated a little bit lower because, to me, the upside, again, for Christian Miller is similar. I think he's just a rotational player at this point. And it's close. He had 0 sacks in 2025. And that production, really hurt him. And I know, obviously, defensive tackle is a position where stats are not the number one cause of your being on the field, right? And we don't need to, go into the stats, but 0 sacks in a full season, you're translating into the NFL. It's like, what do you like from a pass rush standpoint? What do you like from a run stopping standpoint? What do you like from just being able to be utilized in multiple areas of the field and be effective? And I think you're missing some of that with Christian Miller, and that's why I have him rated a little bit lower.
Yeah, and Steve, for you, Christian Miller, Dominique Orange, who do you like better and where are they on your board?
So yeah, I have Dominique Orange. Sorry, I got to get used to using his given name. It's easy to fall into, the trap of the most awesome nickname, but Orange is ranked 1 spot higher for me. I just think he's fundamentally sound as a defender, balance between the run, the pass. I think, again, we're talking about a rotational position, and I'll segue that to Miller in a second. But there's definitely developmental upside to Orange. For him, I think it's more just about getting more technically refined. Okay. So that'll be for him. For Miller, coming out of Georgia, is there a program that's more synonymous with rotational than a Georgia defense? Right. And maybe there is, maybe it's rhetorical. I love the size profile. The dude is just so good as a run defender. He's quick. He's got the ability to shed the blocks. He can align, in different schemes. He's got scheme versatility, for sure. My concern is the missed tackle rates, both in 24 and 25. I'm not going to ding him for sack production because that's, I'm not stat hunting when it comes to defensive tackles. Looks like, the surgery he had on his shoulder after 2024, I don't really think that hampered him. One thing that I like about Halton, going back to him real quick, is some of the moves, the chop, the swim move. I don't think Kristen Miller has a lot of top-notch counter moves. Okay, now obviously that's not saying they can't develop, but also, and part of that could be when you're used in such a heavy rotation as you are in Georgia, that could affect you developmentally too. I think he's got a very high floor as a run defender, and maybe there is some upside as a pass rusher.
Okay, and then Steve, what other defensive tackles need to enter this conversation at this point?
Let's see. Who have we talked about? I'm curious, Cha, if you've taken a look. I will get to Xavier Harris because I was really high on him coming out of the summer, and I had shared, my thoughts with a couple of people, and, they point to the, the off the field stuff. And I reminded this person who's a Browns fan, well, while the Cleveland Browns and the Kansas City Chiefs exist, I don't think a little naughty record is going to harm anything, right? We know the history of some bad boys that certain teams have taken. But I'm curious, Chad, have you done any work on Cam Ball of Arkansas or Tim Keenan of Alabama?
Tim Keenan, yes.
Okay.
Ball, I have not had a chance to do in full yet. But Tim Keenan is my defensive tackle 10 right now. So just cracked the top 10. I think, he's another one of those shorter guys. He measured 6'1", about 323, I think, at the Senior Bowl. I was just looking that up. And again, I mean, he's a really, really strong player. He's really he's going to be another one of those. I have him as a, pure nose tackle, and he's just going to eat blocks in the middle of the field. Be a pretty low upside, high floor kind of player. Like, he's a guy that you take in the 5th round and you can put him on the field for 20% of the snaps year one, and he's going to make plays. So Tim Keenan, to me, pretty solid across the board. I think upside minimal, not going to make a huge impact in the games on paper, right? You look at the stats at the end of the game. Tim Keenan might have 2 tackles and no other stats, and he might have played a heck of a game. He's one of those type of players. So I have him inside my top 10 for right now. I would have a hard time seeing that staying because he's already at 10, and I've only looked at 11 guys in full. So I'm gonna guess he'll be going down a little bit. But that's the only one of those 2 that I got to look at. Tell me about Cam Ball.
Yeah, I was actually getting ready to transition because I didn't know if Newt was still around. Wanted to talk about Aaron Graves, but yeah. Randall Slifer, if you're watching, I'm giving love to the Arkansas dudes. Another, rotational interior defender, just very reliable on early downs. There's value, steady, run defender. He's just consistent in his trench play and complementary, with his pass rush, offering. Definitely a day 3 guy. He is ranked 15 for me. There are some other, bigger names people might be surprised, but that I have him ahead of. But yeah, I don't know if Newt is still around, but if you are, my man, yeah, Aaron Graves, he's my number 10. Talk about, I mean, as a strong run defender, certainly right there, right? Just very high effort. Good, good sack production, 23% win rate. I think I closed my spreadsheet got a little click happy while waiting. He's got a wrestling background, good hand usage. After Logan Lee left 2 years ago, Graves took on a bigger role and just, became one of the better interior, guys in college football. I don't think his athleticism is, going to get the oohs and ahs, but it's more about effort and technique with him. And I do think he could be an early day 3 guy. He obviously not in my top 100, but I definitely think a round 4 on him. Just trying to think, are there any other names that we should cover?
Well, yeah. So Taylor, what other names are in this tier for you?
Yeah, my defensive tackle number 8 right now is Chris McClellan out of Missouri. That is another massive human being, 6'4", 323 pounds, rocking the single digit, number 7. So Chris McClellan, another guy that stands out on tape at Missouri. He is another guy just very, very strong, and I like his upside. I like what he brings from what he could develop into, and I think he's a little bit bigger. He's going to play more inside for sure. Less opportunities to rush, probably one-on-one with a guard than you would want. But he kind of reminds me a little bit of Savion Jones in terms of what's happening right now with him. Chris McClellan is a guy who just dominated the Senior Bowl. Savion Jones did the same thing last year, a guy that was probably like a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick. Savion Jones ended up vaulting himself up to be, I think, the 102nd overall pick. So in the 4th round, because of what he stacked from his Senior Bowl performance and on. McClellan is a guy, you see him dominate at the Senior Bowl, you go turn on the tape, he's also dominating. He's doing it at Missouri. He's making a ton of plays, and I just see him as a guy who could be a riser throughout this process and kind of already has. I have a 4th round grade on him now. I don't think had he shown what he showed at the Senior Bowl, he probably would have even been one of the top 15 defensive tackles that I looked at. And now he's right now 8th on my board. And I would imagine he stays around there. I haven't given out many 4th round grades, but I do have him a little bit of a tier above Kristen Miller, Tim Keenan, and then Rayshon Benny as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other?
It's interesting.
Tackles.
Just
oh, go ahead.
Just to stick with McClellan, he played 2 years at Missouri, came over from Florida. When he was at Florida, he was in that odd front, a lot of 3-4, and he did quite a bit of nose tackle snaps there, not as that pure, long term. And then he goes over, and he actually has experience in multiples. So I brought up the nose tackle thing. He's been used at 3 tech. He's even been used at 5 tech secondarily. He's been in some of those shade fronts. I would say primarily, he will be, at his best as a 3 tech inside penetrator. But Jim and I had talked about him backstage after we finished the show last week. So I wanted to make sure I got some more eyes on him. And, I just like the way he can really shoot through on the A gap. You want that pocket push and disruption. So wanted to make sure we covered him.
Yeah, according to PFF anyways, he has lined up in the B gap 1,239 snaps in his career, just 143 inside in the A gap and 168 over tackles. So, yeah, I think he's going to be one of those guys lines up over guard, and he's going to be able to make plays early, especially on just 4-man rushes. I think this is a guy that you take in the 4th round, you try to develop him. You can even take him in the back end of the 3rd round. I don't think that that's going to be far off, right? In terms of whether it's pick 86, like the 12th defensive tackle last year got drafted, or if Chris McKellen's the 6th defensive tackle off the board at pick 90 this year or whatever it is, because the class isn't quite as good. He's a guy that you can take. He can be, I think a good fit for him would be a team like the Eagles or a team like the Browns, teams that really want to rush with 4 players consistently. I mean, the Broncos, he would be a great fit in Denver as well. He's someone that lines up and he can rush the passer in a 4-man front. He can stop the run in a 4-man front. And I just really like what I saw from McClellan on tape. Measurables macked it up at the Senior Bowl, then a week of domination. I assume if he runs like I think he'll run at the Combine, I think the sky's the limit for Chris McClellan.
Okay. And like McClellan is somebody that I know, like when Newt and Owen, they don't see him the same. So this isn't McClellan specifically is a player who for some is higher than others. And again, like McClellan would be one, like if you want a 0 or a 1, McClellan's going to fill that bill. Or Taylor, do you think he's the type of guy that you move up and down the line?
Yeah, I think he's someone you can move up and down the line. I think he's just a playmaker, right? And he's got a big body. He's lanky, and I think he's going to be someone that can be developed. I think his best football days are ahead of him, and that's why I have him ranked inside the top 8.
Okay. And then, so at this point, I think we've talked about 12 players.
Yeah. I do want to go back to Xavier Harris and talk about him. Like I said, because he was a guy I was really high on coming out of last summer. Can't believe that's like 6 months ago already. But obviously the concern is just the domestic violence or the off-field stuff, whatever it was. But I mean, 6'7" And the last weight I had him at, I don't have the All-Star game spreadsheet. 6'7", 330 pounds. I mean, how are you that big? That's almost svelte for 6'7", right? You hear that number, you would expect like an O lineman who's 350, 360. But that size, that physicality, obviously primarily a really stout run defender, but that burst, the juice, whatever you want to call it, as a pass rusher is wild. And there might be 2 draft professors that have spent some time at 7 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays talking about special teams. That's a dude you want to put out there on special teams, because that sucker is going to block kicks. Yeah. That's where I want to see him.
Yeah, I'm curious, Jim. What do you think about a 6'7" defensive tackle? Because your team just took one last year, and I think a lot of people had him either a first round, back into the first round grade, all the way down to 4th, 5th round pick for Deion Walker, and he ends up going I think the 3rd round, around what?
We took him at the top of round 4. We traded up in round 4 to take Deion Walker. We traded 2 fours to move up in the 4th to go get him.
And that's pretty much how you know that he was a pretty consensus top 100 player, because you have teams willing to trade up into that, early 100, in the 4th round to get him. Yeah. But to me, and you might agree with this, Jim, you might not agree with this, but to me, a defensive tackle that big, I don't think it necessarily helps his stock as much as we think. I think that's something, but I do agree on the special teams thing. I mean, who doesn't want a 6'7" guy in there to block kicks? But the best kick blocker in the NFL is Shelby Harris, and he's 6'3". So doesn't necessarily translate. But again, Jim, I'm curious in your thoughts on it, because you've just seen this with your team recently, and what does that mean for a guy?
Yeah. So let's emphasize, because we talked about this earlier in the podcast as well, right? When you have because Caleb Banks and Xavier Harris, I think the conversation is similar, right? You have a taller defensive tackle, which means pad level will be an issue. But you have to recognize what the player's game is. Don't look at their weight and say they're a nose tackle, right? You have to look at their play style, right? Because the way that different defensive tackles win won't be the same way that other tackles win. Zane Durant and Caden McDonald will not win the same way, right? They are like polar opposites, really, right? You put one on the nose, you put one at the 3 tech, right? So, and it's the same thing, like you look at Kalijah Kancey and Vita Vea, right? They don't win the same way. So you have to recognize how to use them. So Xavier Harris, could you imagine him in an odd front as a defensive end where he gets to move sideways, right? Because, for example, that's Deion Walker, when he can move laterally, he's elite. If he gets to penetrate, he's elite. But if you want him to hold the point of attack like a fire hydrant, go get a Lee Hunter or a Caden McDonald or a Chris McClellan, right? But even McClellan may have a pad level issue, because Chris McClellan is kind of tall for a nose tackle, because I believe he's 6'4".
Yeah.
Not as bad as 6'8" or 6'6", but even
not as bad. Not as bad.
Right. But yeah, I probably should have chosen better words there. But there are because, for example, Tim Keenan is shorter. So if you have to compare McClellan to Keenan, there's a chance that you might like Keenan better, because he might be prototypical size, even if McClellan can give you some things that Keenan can't. So
yeah, I mean, I don't think. I mean, I'm not going to compare. This is not a comparison, so I don't want this clip taken out of context. But a guy like Calais Campbell, right, who's 6'8", 285 pounds, listed. I mean, I don't think there. I mean, he's lined up through his entire career, and it is a long and very, very historic career for Calais Campbell. He's one of very few players. So again, not a comp, just a player mold type of situation. And you see that Calais Campbell at 6'8", 285 has played, about half of his career snaps over the tackle, right? And about a fourth of his snaps, maybe a fifth, or maybe 40% of his snaps are coming, 35% of his snaps are coming in the A gap, right? That's where he's starting. So this is a guy that can be moved around the defensive line. And the best thing about the NFL is how matchup specific every game plan is. You might see a guy like Xavier Harris get picked up in the 4th, 5th round and have his best impact in a random game in week 8 because the opposing team's right tackle is out. They're starting a backup right tackle. So they decide to line up this huge defensive tackle over, the right side of the formation over the right tackle. And he just has his way with the backup right tackle, right? I think it's a rotational guy that you can move inside, you can move outside, and you can have someone that, again, is going to make plays regardless. And I think he might be more suited for, kind of a role within that, Calais Campbell kaleidoscope, I guess I'll call it. But I don't know. Obviously, I don't think he's going to be Calais Campbell, and I want that on record. But, just a similar player profile from a huge, tall 6'8" size standpoint. That I think, maybe it is. And even Calais Campbell, who has played 15 years in the NFL, was a 2nd round pick, barely top. He went 50 overall. So it is a thing for some of these guys, a little bit bigger, to fall in the draft. So I actually see him maybe falling, especially due to the off the field stuff, along with the kind of awkward size. Like, you have to have a plan for this guy in order for you to take him at the top of the 4th round, or, even with a 5th round pick. So that's kind of where I'm at with Xavier Harris. I haven't done a full eval yet, but from what I have looked up so far, that's kind of, the mold that I'm sensing could be good for him.
Okay. And any other defensive tackles that you guys would like to bring to people's attention that are, it feels like you guys got pretty much into like your round 4 to round 5 grades, but Steve, anybody else that's kind of in that tier for you that you want to mention?
Let's see. There's a lot of guys, but that I could go through. Tyler Onyedem, I could talk about him. Let me pull this up. Anthony Russo, one of our draft professors, he put out, I think it was this week or over the weekend, his top 150. And there was a defensive tackle from SMU in there, Terry Webb.
Yep.
And, what was wild is I watched a little bit, and I'll be the first to say, we did a bunch of SMU preview shows here, during the fall. Not a guy I was totally familiar with, but I saw him in there, went back, watched a few games. But what really drove me back in like pretty much the middle of the night last night was I saw Durst wasn't familiar with him. Now, for those that are new, exactly, Taylor's reaction just said it all, because Durst to me is a football player encyclopedia.
Yep.
Like, the Rain Man of football players. No offense.
No, the fact that in the group,
completely complimentary.
In the group chat today, he said he just found out about Jalen Husky from Maryland because he was scouting the freshman All-American edge rushers, and I just thought that was amazing.
That's right. I forgot about that.
He needs to dig more into Husky because he was looking at the freshman All-Americans. I know he gets on guys super early and knows a lot of players.
Oh my God.
Okay, but in fairness, right? Finding players and keeping them up to date is really difficult, because some people will watch a player in May and then they don't go back and they don't update their evals.
Yep.
Right? Because I have been on podcasts with people where I could tell they were reading their summer scouting report, and I'm like, that doesn't match the report that every other draft professor gave in the player. It's like they haven't updated it since the summer. So yeah, like, it's okay to not know about a player. Like, I was talking with Chris Trapasso, who's with CBS, right? He's with CBS, I believe, if I have that right.
Yeah.
And I was chatting with him about coming on a podcast, and I said, have you watched Jalen Husky yet? He's like, he was going to be like one of my next watches. And I said, well, if you're coming on the podcast with us to talk about safeties, I want to hear your feedback on Husky. And he shouted me out in a tweet earlier today, right? But it's okay to not have watched a player yet. We shouldn't be I don't even know really what the right word is, but it's okay to not have watched a player yet.
Yeah. Steve and I
It's
talked
okay.
about this today. It's like anyone,
Yeah.
I think like it's great having content, your top 150, your top 100. There's still so much to be done. We haven't even got to the pro days, the combines, anything like that, any athleticism score, which is all the Colts draft off of. So it's like the Colts don't even have their board set because the Raz site isn't up to date yet. So it's like we have a lot to go through. All you can do is go through players at your own pace, and it is a lot. If you're actually watching these guys, watching film, trying to get your breakdown, obviously Steve and I have done it for safeties now, running backs, defensive tackles, but a lot of my other player boards outside of the top maybe 15, 20 players in the class are pretty incomplete. It's like it's just a process.
Yeah.
It takes some time, but man, it is a blast, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
But anyway, where this whole thing snowballed, it was really just to pay, Durst a well-earned compliment because, man, is his knowledge and familiarity. But yeah, before we wrap up, let's just touch on Terry Webb, right? So he started at JUCO, Kilgore College, and I had to look at that twice because, you start, maybe your eyes start seeing things, and I'm like, wait a minute, am I thinking Jalen Kilgore, or does that really say Kilgore College? Okay. So yeah, it does. He started there. He went to Texas State and then moved over to SMU. Decent production. I would say, the notable side of him is just the ability with power rush moves to collapse the pocket, multiple pass deflects. So therefore, his awareness, his timing is good. He has the ability to finish when the quarterback is holding on to the ball, right? So he sticks with it, just a really good interior power defender. I think, he's probably one of the better ones in that A gap. He just knows how to completely compress and squeeze that pocket more so than being that explosive, penetrator.
Okay.
Yep.
And Taylor, anybody else, or we've exhausted?
No, we've exhausted my top 10. The only other player I have a full grade on is a 6th round on Rayshon Benny. I don't have much to say about him. I think he's more of a rotational. I put him as a nose. That's where I graded him. Just someone that can play over the ball. But other than that, no, I have some guys in here that I didn't get to, like Grayson Halton, Landon Robinson. Obviously, I just saw Anthony's top 152, and I saw Terry Webb before this show as well, so I need to look into him. And then a couple other guys that I'm going to be looking into are Dante Corleone, DeMonte Capehart, and then Renee Conga is another one that has graded highly for me so far. I've only put in my production score, but he's up there as well. And then Caleb Proctor from Southeast Louisiana, another guy I want to look at. So those are probably next on my list for defensive tackles, but I feel pretty good about my top 10. Those are a lot of good players in this class, even though it's not as maybe stacked as last year's, right?
Well, and something that I like to point out, right? So when we're podcasting on Draft Professor, my suggestion to the podcasters is to talk about the players they have graded in rounds 1 through 5, which would be their top 175 players. And here's the reason why. So I love doing 7-round mocks with groups of people. I have been doing 7-round mocks with groups of people for the better part of about 8 years. And one of the things is that if the board is built effectively, I can be drafting a player that's at like 150 to 175 on the board in round 7. Yep. Right? So, and this is true. Most NFL teams don't have 275 players on their board. Their boards are a lot smaller, right? And it's the same concept, right? Which players did they grade? They decide were scheme fits for their team. And they've removed a lot of players from their board saying, we're a zone team. He's a press man corner. He's not even on the board, right? And then we want a certain style of running back. And if he's not that style, or we're not going to take, those types of things. Yeah. So generally speaking, like if somebody like Taylor, if you've got like a top 150 and then you compare it to Anthony's top 150, there's probably going to be 40 players on yours that aren't on his and vice versa. There's
Oh, yeah.
not overlap in that regard. And that is, to me, the entire fascination of doing the draft, because the skill is ranking the players between 80 and 150. Right?
Yep.
If we start comparing top 50s, most people are going to have 45 of the same 50 players. Most people will. So, and if you need evidence of that, if you're watching with evidence of that, there is something called the Huddle Report, and they have a contest every year of who can nail the first round and whose top 100 got the most hits. Like who matched the draft's top 100 to their top 100. Last year, I got 82.
Wow.
I beat Chris Collinsworth by 1.
That's awesome. Yeah, I only ranked 115 players last year. But the final mock draft that I put out had 30 of the 32 players go in the first round. The one I put out draft day morning. So not the right places all the time, but 30 of the top 32 players, obviously no Shedeur Sanders. For me, that would be no Landon Jackson. I was a huge Landon Jackson guy. I thought he'd sneak into the back half of the first round, but cool. All right. Well, that's all my defensive tackles.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
Taylor, do you want to let everybody know about your Substack and all of the other content that you make?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, head to footballwithchow.com. Obviously, I just talked about this. This is my first time ever ranking like every single position, this thoroughly. So last year I got the 115 players. I think I'm already close to 100, just with finishing 3 full, position groups. So a lot of that content, once I get these rankings established, is going to be going on the YouTube channel, Football with Chaw as well, where this is also streaming. And then I will be hosting, I believe, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, April 9th, 10th, and 11th.
Yep.
I will be hosting at least on my channel, help with Jim, host the 7-round mock draft, just kind of talk through the players. My board will be built and set by then, so I'll have, stuff to talk about on all these guys and kind of filibuster, kill some time while we do a full 7-round mock draft over a few days. So you can look for that on Football with Charles YouTube as well. I'll be posting that there, obviously on X as well, but that's where you can find my content. Steve?
Yeah. So right down there on X, Twitter, whatever, pick your poison, and YouTube, it's at Steve_NFL. Get all the directions to obviously the YouTube channel, the Substack. The draft content is there. Do a lot talking about the NFL. One of my most popular articles is how to fix the New York Jets, and it's a 1-word article. It just says don't. Pause for effect. Anyway, but yeah, just head on down there. Friday nights, beginning at 7 p.m. I've been able to help out with the Draft Professor weekly mock drafts, sometimes as a GM, most of the time at least tweeting out the first round picks. I get very overwhelmed. That's why I'm not doing all 100, because after the first 32, I need to go for a walk and a glass of water. But yep, that's where, and I will also be involved in April on the 9th, 10th, and 11th. Be running the War Room for the New York Jets, and we are deep in planning so that we have some good guests popping in, good content creators, and yeah, looking forward to it. And then it's on to 2027.
Oh yeah, we are already we are shifting gears. I have people ready to start in May on the college football content. So basically, the way Draft Professor works is from May to October, we cover college football. We cover the players in college football. I think it's the right way to say it. Right? We're not trying to predict who's going to win the Georgia-Alabama game, but we do want to talk about the players on Georgia and the players on Alabama, and we might even tell you which players we think are better. But it's less team focused and more which players are the best players in college football. But right now we are neck deep into the 2026 draft class, and we are here with Daily Draft Podcast. So if you want to know more about the podcast, go to Draft Professor at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. Give us a follow. Give us a subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, you can hit that subscribe, please and thank you. We're here every day at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern. So Taylor and Steve are the 7 p.m. show. We actually have another show tonight at 9 where EJ and Christian are going to be going through Fangio defensive fit players. So which players best fit a Fangio defense? And if you like that, we're doing a Flores defense next week. So we cover the draft differently than everybody else. Because we have 2 podcasts a day times 6 days a week, we can do things that other channels don't. We have 110 podcasters that help us put the content together. So if you want to get involved, the best way to do it, again, go to Draft Professor on Twitter. And like Steve said, we have a 32-person mock draft every Friday. We want you to draft for your favorite team. Tell us who you think your team should pick. The podcasters will tell you what they think of your pick for about a minute, and then they're going to move on to the next pick. So it's a very rapid fire. We cover 100 players in 150 minutes. So it's a lot of fun. But with that being said, we are going to close this show down. For Taylor, Steve, myself, the 110 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you on a podcast again in 45 minutes. Thank you, everybody.